An intellectual disability is something, is a phrase that it might be new to some individual and to some people out there. It's just going to be a term or a phrase that may not be necessarily very familiar for many of you folks out there. But the bottom line is an intellectual disability, when you see that term, basically what you're going to be looking at is an individual who's it's a physiological thing to begin with. It's all about the central nervous system, the brain and all its different functions. There is something from infancy in many cases, but there are other avenues in which an individual can have an intellectual disability. But I'm going to start with the most basic form. It's basically somewhere in infancy. Very oftentimes it happens before an individual is born. There's something that is miswired or it doesn't work right in the development of the fetus, and then once the individual is born, the central nervous system doesn't seem to be wired correctly. And it manifests itself in deficiencies related to those human milestones, those typical developmental milestones, such as communication and social skills, and motor milestones that everybody needs to progress through in that stepwise progression. And what happens with an intellectual disability is that central nervous system miswiring has an impact, and it sort of stops the progression of that development, and the milestones are not necessarily hit in the right order, or they're not progressed enough to a certain age level. Intellectual disabilities have historically been known as different terms throughout the field of applied behavior analysis or psychology in general. Probably the most common phrase utilized to describe intellectual disability is mental retardation, and that has been used for decades. And I think we're approaching a better understanding of what this problem entails, and therefore we've come up with, or the field has come up with, a different term, and it's intellectual disability. And basically what you're looking at is an individual that is demonstrating those deficits, the deficits related to social skills, deficits related to the ability to interact with others in an adaptive manner, those communication skills, the ability to tolerate changes in their environment, their ability to learn things. So what happens with intellectual disabilities is that there's this kind of like a wall that an individual cognitively bumps up against at some point in time during their development. So when we're starting to learn more and more abstract cognitive concepts such as math and language and the rules associated with grammar and all those things that require abstract cognitive thinking, individuals with intellectual disabilities are going to hit that wall, and they're not going to be able to progress any further unless they have specialized interventions. And that's where applied behavior analysis comes in, because we can take an individual that has that wall, and we can take that wall and move it further along the line. The interesting thing about intellectual disabilities is it's not strictly related to one specific diagnostic category. Intellectual disabilities can occur in any individual with a variety of different diagnoses, so to speak. So we can have individuals that are what we call the more severe end of the autism spectrum disorders that do have intellectual disabilities. We can find individuals that have Down syndrome that don't necessarily have autism, but they might also share the characteristics of intellectual disability. So it cuts across an entire spectrum of different disorders that you might see in a school setting.